Final Fantasy VII Remake. Just want to make it very clear, this isn't a review of the Final Fantasy VII Remake, bit too late for that. This is more of what I want to see with the future project, with Reunion, with Rebirth, what I think is going to happen with the ending of the DLC, mechanical things that they can improve on, and just in general my thoughts on the entire game. Also, anything from this point on is heavily spoiler based, so please just bear in mind that if you're watching this and you haven't done any of the remake and you don't want to avoid spoilers, don't watch any more of this video. Come back to it later. Save it, come back to it later, go play the game, and then come back. Before we go into the juicy story stuff, I know you're all dying to hear what I think of like the future of the game, where it's going to go. I want to talk about the mechanics of the game. I want to talk about what was great about it in as brief as possible, and then talk about what they could use in the future. And I'm not just talking about combat, I'm talking about the whole thing. There was a lot of worry after the remake came out, and they said, how are they going to fit it all in? There's going to be like 10 games. And then very recently, when they announced the trailer for Rebirth, they said that it's a 3-game project, which I low-key love, by the way, because of 3 discs, 3 games. It's like another shout out to the original. Mechanically speaking, the game will work, and I want to go into why. But here are a few reasons why. But I want first to talk about the combat. The combat, in terms of like, is for me, it was just a genuine joy to play. As an action RPG, I genuinely feel it was really done really well. I know if you go, but in the original this, I don't play the game in that kind of mindset. I'm actually literally thinking, this is the game product we have, this is what I'm using. And overall, including the weapon upgrade system, materia system still kept in the way it was and improved, it's done extremely well, and the game is really well thought about mechanically, which is nice to see. Sometimes the game just gives you a strong story and it's not mechanically built, or it's mechanically built but then gives you no story. Final Fantasy VII Remake does it extremely well for the most part. The Final Fantasy VII Remake base game, there was a huge problem with aerial combat. I really just felt the aerial combat was impossible to deal with in situations. There's the one fight, you have to fight an enemy in the sky, and then even though Cloud, you can use attack with Cloud or anyone, they just leap in the air, like with gravity doesn't matter at that point, and they can beat these enemies up in the air. You can't consistently, because then you all drop. Unless you can use magic and stuff like that, but then, you know, some enemies that are in the sky are weak to ice or aero, and both of those, ironically, have a delay, then like thunder or fire, that are instant attacks. You can begin to see the issues. They actually dealt with the aerial combat in the Yuffie DLC. Yuffie is very fun to play, by the way, and they really deal with the aerial combat extremely well. Before we move on, I just want to cover one more aspect I felt frustrating, but I didn't really think about it towards the end of the game, the ATB. Now, before we automatically jump to where we're going, no, I do not want a turn-based system or any stuff like that. Even the original game was never actually turn-based, by the way. The issue I found with the ATB system in the game was actually, it was always to actually use an ability, you had to take a risk to get it. Now, what I mean is, to build up your ATB, you need to do like normal attacks with Cloud or Yuffie or whoever you're controlling in the game. You have to attack the enemy to build up the ATB to get the boost going, right? The problem with that is, if you need to pull back and defend and be on the defensive, you're in trouble because you've got no ATB to heal with. This became a bigger issue for someone like Aerith, who's a glass cannon, and then automatically, you want to switch to her to heal, and then you have to switch, but you have to do her attack magic thingy just to get that ATB there. And now, if you're fighting like on hard mode or against Bahamut, who targets the player controlled character, it's programmed to do that, then you're in trouble, because all you got to do is one Umbra attack and it's just gone. Which doesn't then involve you having to play very smart tactically. Now, there's nothing wrong with being smart tactically, but it becomes more of a frustration, because if you are just trying to play safe, which a lot of people probably will do, casually speaking, it just feels like you spend a lot of your ATB healing and then not actually enjoying any of the abilities in the game. My solution to this is to bring back a speed stat. Now, I'm not suggesting this will happen, and I really don't think they'll change or add a speed stat in. I think the ATB will never change for the remake project. But have that speed or agility, but bring it back in, and that you have a consistent speed bar that's going up, and then you can have equipment or stat figure that you can change to have different speeds and that, and you can balance it out with the enemy as well in terms of their stats. So overall, you just take some balancing. Not on this game, I'm talking about for future projects. Having that speed stat, you can that way consistently build up each character's ATB and use them strategically in battle whilst you're still wailing away. And you can still have materia ATB boosting effects. I know that there are salute, but there's the ATB boosting materials, but it's not it's not what I mean. You can still have them in to boost that ATB, but then your ATB doesn't go up on attack, so you just need that for damage. I guess it keeps the flow of it. I believe the idea behind it was literally just so the flow of battle was there, and it would kind of have that nice flowing battle, consistent feel to it. But I just feel like it was a very risk factor for starter gameplay, and in tough situations, it wasn't ideal, and it would end in the game over. That being said, the game isn't exactly punishing you literally reload the same fight. However, I do feel that it would actually be more fun if you could use a lot more of the abilities in the game and try different things rather than worrying about your health bar or whether you can heal over and over and over. And honestly, I feel like a speed stat would fix that. And you can balance out of enemies. Or the other solution is the enemies have an ATB system that runs similar to you, so they can attack and only use abilities when they build up their own ATB. No, we don't need to see that ATB, but it's very clear that the enemy can just wail out abilities however they feel like it, and they do not have an ATB built-in system, whereas we do. And I feel that that is slightly imbalanced. And again, you could balance it out with stats, whether they have, even if the enemies have more HP or more attack, but it's balanced out with their ATB and that they're limited and that they have to build up their own abilities, it would make the fight a bit more balanced out. Now, to be fair, this is probably a niche issue. It's more of a hard mode, top secrets fight issue rather than a casual playthrough. That being said, I still feel like everyone would probably rejoice in the fact that you have more control over your ATB rather than having to wail in attacks just to use an ability or even heal. The fact that I can find really two things wrong mechanically in terms of the combat system, in my honest opinion, is great. It means the game's created very well. And especially for a AAA company, I'm very critical for games. I'm very quick to want to jump in and understand mechanics of a game, and Final Fantasy VII Remake does that extremely well. Now, in terms of the game, what's going to be in the game? Where are we going to? But Marsh, how are they going to fit the rest of the game in? They barely fit Midgar onto one game. Let's talk about logistics. Final Fantasy VII Remake is a PS4 game. Rebirth is a PS5 game. I just want to reiterate, there's a big difference in size. So even though there's a PS5 version of the Final Fantasy Remake, that's barely using its potential at this point. Like, there's a big difference and a big step between the two consoles. The size of what they can fit in will work, especially assuming they are keeping the same structure. Yes, I don't want a world map. It will be too much. It's not possible, especially based off the final cutscene on the scene on the DLC. It's kind of like the world is just too big to have as a world map. It's not going to work or be viable. So let's just keep the same structure. Have the chapter, and I believe it will stay the same. You'll have the chapter-based system, and you'll go from place to place via chapters. And I think that works extremely well. That means you can focus on those areas and still build the world in the same way. Final Fantasy VII Remake has 17 chapters just for Midgar, right? I say just for Midgar. Think about it. We can, what's going to happen in Rebirth? You're going to have chapter 1, or we could call it prologue or anything, which is going to start the game in flashback. You don't even start as calm, You're going to start in the flashback. It's going to be introduction, and it's going to be, let me tell you about my story 5 years ago. And then it's going to go straight into the flashback. It's the start of Dark, and that's how the game's going to start. It's the perfect way to start. Then, the same journey will continue. So I'm a firm believer that the same journey, when I say journey, is in the path. We will still go from point A, Midgar, to Northern Crater, B. And the journey to it, will go to Junon, to the Coral Mountains, to Gold Source, to Cosmo Canyon, to Nibelheim, Rocket Town, City of Ancients, all that, and finish the the rebirth on Northern Crater. Why Northern Crater? There's a speculation between the City Agents and Northern Crater, because I think the best way to end the game and start the third game would be the Meteor. I still believe all that's going to be part of the game and the story, because it's kind of the baseline. But that is easily about what? That's about what? At best, with a bit of filler in there, or side content, especially being Gold Saucers, about 26 chapters, give or take. Considering that the PS4 version is 17 chapters, it's very easy to do a 26 to 30 chapter game on a PS5 and still use that same structure, and it still deliver the same quality content that it already has delivered. That, for me, is why I believe it will work. That also leaves room still for future DLC. They don't have to put everything in there. I know that they have tweeted that they're going to put every location in there, but for example, Fort Condor is a mini game. It's have you played Fort Condor? So the actual place that we think we know Fort Condor is going to be is probably just a reactor at the end of the grand scheme of it all, with a bird on top. It's not going to be a place you actually visit. It's going to have any coherent plot story until you get to that, probably in the third game. The game will be able to fit everything. I believe they'll be able to fit and create a mechanically great game. Also, I'm so excited to see the world unveiled before us. We're so focused on what's going to happen in the main plot story, we kind of forgot what may or may not show up in the future. Like, for example, I cannot wait to get the June on and hear this for the first time. Everyone will remember when you first hit that dun 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 dun, dun, you get those chills, and literally that will happen in Rebirth. Like, Cloud will be like, they'll sneak in the Junon to get onto the ship, to get across to the Costa del Sol, and it's just going to be such a thrill ride, because it's going to be such a funny part of the game. But also hearing that theme for the first time, you're going to feel those chills. You'll be like, oh my god, you'll forget. You forgot that these things are going to happen. And at that point, also don't forget Red 13 in a sailor outfit going. I'm also looking forward to things like Gold Saucer, going there for the first time to see the theme park that it is, and maybe explain what it is. I've always believed it's a reactor, how it manages to stay powered. It's kind of mad how it manages to stay powered, right? But they don't really ever explain it. I'm looking forward to Cosmo Canyon. Oh man, not just for the music, but just, you know, more Seto, more Red, you know, more Nanaki, you know, how they say his name properly. Although I'm probably going to disagree, I still call it Mako. And just the further development of the game in general. But just going to those places is going to be a thrill ride. More than Midgar was, to be honest. And the world building is something I'm more interested in. They've done a good job already in a few cutscenes. They've shown how dead the world is from the Mako poisoning. From all the Mako. You know, when you play in the original game, for example, you see grass and grassland everywhere, and that was just to create that form of colour, so the game didn't feel completely dull. But actuality, they are world building and making it like more of a desert, and that's correct. That's actually the correct way that the game should be displayed, and they portray that a bit more in Advent Children back when that film came out. And I believe that the remake is going to use that almost as a base to kind of deliver that kind of world building. So I'm very much looking forward to the world building and seeing things for the first time again. And one thing that the remake did do is it gave us that first time feeling for something we thought we wouldn't be able to get back. And I'm very much looking forward to those kind of small little tidbits. You know, again with Red 13 dressed up as a sailor, Kate Sith, you know, trying to do the fortune tell with like Cloud and whoever he walks around Gold Saucer with, meeting Sid for the first time and hearing this. Just think, like, hearing the remake renditions of these, the remade versions, going through those motions and hearing it, and that's when the nostalgia is going to kick in. Let's talk about what we're really here for. What do you think is going to happen? Where's the story going? What direction is it? Is it going to be like the original? Are they going to do everything they did in the original game? Are they going to ruin it again? What is going on? Okay. For us to move forward, one thing we need to understand is where the game is and what it is. It is not a Final Fantasy VII remake. It is not a full remake of the original game. This isn't like Resident Evil 2 remake. This isn't like The Last of Us remake. This is its own entity. Final Fantasy VII remake is called remake for plot reasons, not because it's a remake of the original game. It's just so well marketed and put together that they could call it remake and get away with it. That's why the second game is called Rebirth. They call it Remake Project, but it's like Remake, Rebirth, and Remember. I don't know. It's its own entity. And what's hard to understand about that is we have those who play the video game will spend so much time going, this happened in this game, so this has to happen here. And there's so much things like sequel theories and stuff being thrown around. So I'm going to kind of jump into this now. Here, give you my thoughts. And please bear in mind, these are my thoughts. And I'm basing it all off everything Square's told us and what I've picked up from the game. Ironically, there are lots of breadcrumbs in the Final Fantasy remake that we missed, that because we wouldn't have realised it until we saw the Rebirth trailer. First and foremost, let's talk about timelines. So, Final Fantasy VII original game has its as a start, middle, and end, an A, B, C. You get from A, you start from Reactor 1, and then B, you leave Midgar, then C, you go to Northern Crater, then D, you save the world. Remake Project will still have that same A, B, C, and D. I still believe that we're going to fight Sephiroth at the end of the third game, but which Sephiroth we're going to fight is a whole different kettle of fish. I think there's a multi-universe Sephiroth there is a Sephiroth in the game that is pushing Cloud to that. He's like, Sephiroth needs Cloud as much as Cloud needs Sephiroth at this point in time, and that's made very clear. The one who's playing in Cloud's mind. That's not the same Sephiroth you meet at the Shinra Tower. That is Genova Sephiroth that you chase in the original game. For those who were a bit unsure what I'm talking about, in the original game, the only time that real Sephiroth is around is Safer Sephiroth right at the very, very end of the game and in the flashback. Other than that, you're literally chasing Genova throughout the entire game. So that one in the Shinra Tower in the remake is still the Genova one, the one who's trying to create reunion. And then there's a Sephiroth who's like jumping in different timelines and multiverse. Now, this may seem crazy, but if you've played the Final Fantasy VII remake, you already know there's going to be crazy involved in the games. So, I say, and I implore you, go in with an open mind, go in embracing the change, allow it to happen. Because if you don't allow this to happen, you're just going to be disappointed thinking, oh, well, they didn't do it, it's not a remake of the original. And I'll be like, I told you it's not a remake of the original, I told you it's different. Is this bad? No, I actually love the fact that I'm going to get a completely different experience with Final Fantasy VII Remake Project than I did from the original game. One, that means I can still love and enjoy the original game for what it is. It does not make the original irrelevant in any way. Completely remaking the original would pretty much make it irrelevant. Also, remake obviously opens up to new audiences. They get to do something they never did before and actually expand the Final Fantasy VII world. Something that felt limited before. Like, for example, the Wutai War is something that's barely touched upon in the original or even mentioned until Crisis Core, the game that started. And then there's more about the Wutai War. And the reason for that, and I don't think it's been it's just speculated at this point, but is that they couldn't fit it in the original game, either due to time constraints or just game space, for all we know. Like, I don't know what it was. I feel like Wutai was just kind of put there in the original game, whereas here now it's like very prominent, and it's definitely going to be a bit different. I know they've said Crisis Core is being pretty much the same as the original Crisis Core Reunion. However, there's going to be differences because it does fit into the current canon. So that's where the timelines are going to kind of like start going off on a fork in a road. For example, things like Yuffie mentions her dad's been locked up. She doesn't DLC. It's kind of like created this whole different timeline, which means you get a different experience of the game. We don't know what's going to happen, which makes this almost more exciting, which gives us this opportunity to talk about this kind of stuff. Because if we knew what was going to happen, we play it once and never play it again, we get bored of it. And that's where I feel like embracing that change is totally worth it. Predictions. One, there's a chance that Vincent and Yuffie aren't playable in Rebirth in the main base games. They're going to have DLCs. They're going to try and incorporate Dirge of Cerberus. They brought VII in the DLC for Yuffie. How is he going to fit into the main plot? Either he becomes a main plot point and they add that element into it, or it falls nicely into Vincent, and Vincent has his own side content, and then he meets him, and then maybe Yuffie and Vincent do join the party in the third game. The reason why I say that is there's a lot of characters introduced in Rebirth. Like, you think about it, we played Remake with 4 characters. Now we've got those same 4 characters, but now we're also adding Kate Sith, assuming that he's going to be playable. I personally think he's going to be a sensory character. It's been done before in other games. There's Red, Sid, Yuffie and Vincent in there as well. It's just going to make the game overwhelming and too many new mechanics, you know, especially when you have to create this all new characters. And I think it'd be a good way of pacing it all out as well. Again, don't get me wrong, I want Yuffie and Vincent in the next game too. I'm not against them being in the game. I just feel a realistic way, and that way it gives us something to work towards and look forward to in the third game as well. New characters still being introduced to new, you know, abilities and stuff. Characters' abilities will probably be a little bit different. To recreate a fresh perspective video game, you do need to make sure that, you know, you're looking after and keeping people engaged. Giving us the same abilities that we got from the Final Fantasy VII Remake would be a bit bland. Like, you still need, like, there will still be some base things. We'll start things like Buster Sword and so on and so forth. But I mean, like, now they can use other things. Like, for example, Tifa has Dolphin Blow, or her version of Dolphin Blow as a second limit break. Now they can use one of her other ones, you know, and stuff like that. You know, I'm very much thinking about what mechanics they can add into the new characters. But what about Zack? Zack definitely will not be a playable character unless, again, well, he's got his own game, so he's not going to be a playable character in the main game. However, what I think he will be is a huge plot device. So this is going to be quite big, so just bear with me. At the end of the game, he shows up, right, and he fights the soldiers as he does at the end of Crisis Core. Now, everyone's expecting him to die, right? But he doesn't. Now, here's why. At the end of Final Fantasy VII Remake, we defeat the Whispers. We defeat the Whispers and we defeat Fate itself. Now, the whole point of Fate is not the original game. I need people to drop the whole original game momentum. It's more because you can create the world of Fate, and this is what's meant to happen without any prequels in any story. You know, you can still work. You can still say that, you know, this was their path, but you defeat Fate itself. Like, you defeat what's supposed to have happened, what they think is going to happen. Which is why the game ends with the line, "The unknown journey will continue." Zack there is fighting all the soldiers as he does planned, and maybe that time is frozen for a period of time as well. And then we defeat the Whispers. Then the journey continues. We need to defeat Sephiroth. Because then Zack, at the end of the DLC, opens the church door to go find Aerith, to go reacquaint with his lost love. And he's like, Aerith? So now he's going to be looking for Aerith. Now, Aerith already has a good idea of what's going to happen in her journey. The way I see the Cetra, and, you know, because they didn't really get to paint it in the original game very well, but just without, you know, through text and imaging and wording. But in this game, it's different because we've got the voice acting and stuff like that. So now it's more like they can create imagery around it. And actually, I've always thought of the images that the Cetras see, the ancients see, are like what we would call deja vu, or we see them in dreams. Like, but they are real. You know, that's the planet talking to her. Stuff like, you know, that's how she incorporates things. So she's seeing visions, things like her death, and what may or may not happen. Now, and they kind of address that a bit in the remake as well, because she feels like she doesn't want to leave Midgar. She makes it very clear in a very metaphoric way that she doesn't want to leave Midgar. She missed the still sky. There's that bit where she feels unsettled about going on a journey. You know, when you're going through the train graveyard, and there's that little bit where she's a kid and all the kids run away from her and she feels alone, and then they're like, "We're here with you." She feels a bit of confidence that maybe it doesn't have to happen that way. And for the most part, she seems like normal Aerith until the very end of the game, when she's like, Sephiroth is the bad guy, and you're just like, okay, now she knows a bit too much. But she does give out some important information. She looks Sephiroth dead in the eye. The Sephiroth that I think is multi-universe Sephiroth goes, "You're wrong." She doesn't say like, "Oh, you're the epitome of evil," or "What you're doing is incorrect." She goes, "You're wrong," which screams to me Actually, he doesn't belong in that world. It's not the Sephiroth that belongs in that world. It's a different Sephiroth that doesn't belong there. And that's the same Sephiroth that's pushing Cloud and wants Cloud to become something else. Because he knows Cloud is going to be his ultimate demise. So how, if he pulls Cloud into it, I feel it's very Star Wars. Those who watch Star Wars will know exactly what I'm talking about. This feels so similar to Star Wars. Pulling them into the dark side kind of feels. But Aerith knows more than she gives out. Now, I don't think she knows the whole journey. She's still herself. She's still the same old Aerith. She's not going, she can't see the future. She's just seen imagery and what's going to happen. Now, Zack, as far as we know, is alive. Now, what part in time is alive? Because we do see in the trailer him carrying Cloud into Midgar. Now, you could say that timeline is now converged into the current, and there's now one big timeline, and this is the ultimate timeline, and this is the ultimate journey. And now he's going to be looking for Aerith. Now, here's a crazy idea for me that I had, is that Aerith isn't going to die the way we expect her to do. If she does, she'll go to the City Agent, she'll do that. You know, Cloud's gonna go mad with the black materia thing. But then just as the scene that we all know, where Jenova Sephiroth is coming down from above Aerith, Zack's gonna swoop in with a sword, and he's like, ching! And it's gonna be like, yo, I got this! And he becomes a sacrifice and ends up saving Aerith. Which could mean that we keep her in the pie. But then it could mean, and then she can summon, you know, Holy to fight Meteor. They don't succeed because Cloud still gives the black materia to Sephiroth, who then summons Meteor anyway, but they still could fight it later on. And then Aerith actually becomes more like a holy character who ends up saving, transport Tifa through the live stream to, you know, she finds where Cloud is, and then Tifa is the one who saves Cloud again, and that kind of stuff. And that's where I feel it could end up going, but that's going into the third game and speculation for later. But that's how I think Zack could be used. Like, he's going to be chasing and finding the party, and I'm very interested to see what they do with it. And this is why I feel like there's different timelines. So I feel like, you know, what we expect to happen in the original game is not going to happen in the remake project. And the reason for that is, well, it doesn't have to be the same. See what they could do with it. You know, see how different. You know, having these different timelines means that you could have different outcomes. You can expand on that universe so much more. You can do so much more with it. I'm also very excited to see how they're going to incorporate Wutai. When I was playing the remake, I felt that there was definitely, I wanted to hear more about Wutai. They cover it in chapter 4 when, you know, like, they're trying to, Shinra's making it very clear they're going to blame Wutai and try and, you know, get away with the war again. And, you know, whereas in the original game, using the original game as a basis, Wutai kind of just gave up and were just like there. And her dad is just there. He's just like a lazy guy goofing around. And Yuffie's like, I'm collecting materia so we can fight Shinra. And she feels like she's the only one doing it. Whereas now they're more of an empire. And I'm really excited to see Wutai be this big empire, big city kind of vibe. I'm very much excited to see Wutai for the culture it's going to show in the game as well. And also the political part, how they are, their views on Shinra. Like, they even cover it extremely very well. There's a conversation that's happening mid-game between Yuffie and Sonon about, oh, the people in Midgar don't want Midgar to stop. They just want to have a fair economy. They want to be able to vote for the leadership, and actually different to what Wutai and how they run their country. And it's because they're both like, that seemed weird. It's really interesting that hidden dialogue's there, and I felt that was really interesting. I didn't discover that until I was playing it from hard mode either. But it's little tidbits like that, and it screams to me that it's going to be such a bigger part, and they are kind of half working with Avalanche, you know, top secret. Like, Sonon makes it very clear that they don't agree with what Avalanche are doing, but they are working with each other temporarily. They have the same enemy, which is Shinra. So once they're taking down Shinra, then they'll talk about their differences. That's the plan, you know, and Sonon even says that. But what about Nero and Vice? What about these characters? I feel like Sonon's going to show up as an apparition for Yuffie in the future, because I think Nero has just absorbed him. Vice, I'm very interested to see how he's incorporated. I imagine he's just a prequel to like the future Dirge of Cerberus, assuming that they remake that as well. Like, I'm sure they're going to incorporate it. My view is that they're going to bring in the entire Final Fantasy VII world into this at some point, like recreate the whole thing. I'm not saying they're going to make Advent Children. I'm saying that and things like that. I think it's going to go down a different path. Maybe if the geostigma does become a thing, they can actually introduce it better than they did before. This is assuming that this stuff happens. If they do a different ending and a different resolution, that's fine. I think the ending resolution will definitely be different because they used the card where Cloud and Sephiroth have that one-on-one inside Cloud's mind. They use the exact same cutscene moments before they have the conversation about 7 seconds, you know, which they haven't explained, by the way. None of us still know what 7 seconds. We can speculate, but there's no clue what 7 seconds means yet. Like, it has to be a different ending. It has to have this different kind of explosive ending. I was very excited to not know what's going to happen next. Also, we noticed from one of the last cutscenes of the game as well, I'm talking DLC here, there's already changes to it, for those who are wondering where it's going to go. Barrett's still in charge of the group, by the way. In the original game, they like appoint Cloud to be the leader of the group. They're like, Barrett, you've had your moment, it's time to let Cloud lead the group. And he's like, and he gets on a gruffle about it, but then he accepts it, right? In the cutscene, they're like, hey Barrett, what are we're walking along the road. How long before we walk along the road? Or, you know, and he's just like, yeah, we're just going to keep walking. And then he's like, you know, he's still leading the group. And the character they built in the game needs to deliver to that. And maybe it will become Cloud. Maybe after the events of Coral Mines. You know, who knows? Who knows how it goes? Because obviously that's going to be his big moment. Marsh, what are you most excited for in the game? Character development. I am so looking forward to see how the character delivered out to the next level. Barrett still being the leader. Aerith becoming more aware of who she is and how important she is. Tifa trying to see if she's still protecting Cloud, if she comes clean during the flashback and say, actually, it's been 7 years. Cloud figuring out who he is in general, because at this point he doesn't know whether it's that, you know, he's not Zack Cloud. I don't think the Zack Cloud thing is going to be a thing. I think it's just going to be in his mind Cloud and Genova trying to control him to still make him go to the reunion, because he still has those cells in him. So that's interesting. And obviously the development of all the other characters, like, you know, Red, Sid, how they're going to introduce all these characters, and you know how exciting it's going to be. I'm also excited to see the world as it is. You know, they'll deliver further. The extra scene at the end of the DLC screamed to me, and when I heard it Heading Our Way, the Calm theme song, I was like, oh my god, that's so good. You know, I was just like, it was just like that feeling. I got excited. Wrapping this up, I want to leave on a note that I kind of hope helps people enjoy the next game. I don't want you to see this as a remake to Final Fantasy VII anymore. I want you to see this as its own entity. And here's why. I'm going to talk about the titles of the games. So, first game is called Final Fantasy VII Remake. Second game is called Final Fantasy VII Rebirth. Now, I'm just talk very briefly on what I think those mean. I don't know what the third name is, obviously, at this point in time when this video came out. It's not been confirmed at this point. So, Final Fantasy VII Remake is a remake of the events. So the events that we go through in the game are being remade because of the Whispers. But those are slightly different in those instances because, you know, life is like that. You can make different decisions on the moment. For example, the Whispers hadn't shown up. Cloud would not have gone to Sector 5 bombing, and then he would not have fallen down that gap, and he would never have met Aerith. There's no conceivable way he'd meet Aerith. Those Whispers made him go on that mission so that he could meet Aerith. So Aerith would then end up going on a journey, because she hadn't met Cloud. There's no way she's going to go on that journey, right? She's just going to be back home with Elmira, picking flowers, helping Sector 5 summons and all that stuff. And the course of events will be extremely different. Like I said before, the Fates are controlling it in the remake. They are remaking the events. The events are being remade to live that moment. And then we defeat those Fates who have remade those events for us. And then we have Rebirth. Now, all the events that happen are now been reborn. As in, we don't know what's going to happen. Anything could happen. It's a free-for-all. Nothing's going to stop. There's no fate stopping the course of events. So everything is now been reborn. Hence, Rebirth. Final Fantasy VII Rebirth. The game has been reborn. Which means that it could very much deviate in its own way. Actuality, they could just go crazy and do whatever they want with it. Like I said, I still believe that, you know, they're still going to travel to Northern Crater from A to B. That's going to be their main story plot. It's just what happens in between that could be very different and could be good. I think it's going to be a good thing. And then the third one, in my opinion, could be something like recreate. They call it like recreate or something along the line. Okay, there might be a better word for recreate. It will definitely be because that's the theme. But like recreate, because in that way we've the story's been reborn, and then the events happen, and I still believe it's going to end at Northern Crater and the meteor, and then dun 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 dun, the meteor comes down, end of the game, credits roll. Everyone's like, oh my god. And then, well, the game ends with like Tifa looking up basically from Junon, and she's like sees the meteor. And then obviously the third game could start off in Junon, and you have to escape from Junon and do all that fun stuff there, and then go find Cloud. All that stuff I still believe is going to be a factor and be brought into it. I still think Cloud's going to lose his mind, absolutely. But yeah, then you recreate the world. You could say recreate the events, but nah. So I do think there's a chance they've been doing something else. I'm going with recreate for now. May have a better word for that down the line, but then they can recreate the events. And again, I guess that's my theory behind it. It's a different timeline, it's a different course of events, and the events have been remade, reborn, and recreated. And that's my thoughts on the Final Fantasy VII remake, speculating what could happen, how it's going to go down, what I'm looking forward to. I can't wait to jump into it. We got like a year or so away from the game for Rebirth to release. From this moment anyway, I can't wait to see it, experience the next stage of the series. And then the DLCs that come with it as well could be growing into that as well. So there's so much potential now that could happen, especially when they releasing Crisis Core on every console. The opportunity is massive what they couldn't do. So it's very exciting to see where things are going to end up. I could talk about this for another half an hour, but I'm not going to take too much of you more. I've already taken up enough of your time. But I hope you've enjoyed it. Please do share with me what you think is going to happen, what your thoughts are, whether you agree with me or disagree with me. But yeah, I don't think it's a sequel in any way. I think it's its own entity, and I think it's the best way to view it. That way you don't sit there comparing it to the original game either. Please do share with me how you think the future games are going to pan out, how the story is going to unveil itself, what's going to happen, who Sephiroth is, which Sephiroth we're fighting, who the real Sephiroth is, who Genova is, what's going to happen, blah blah blah, all that crazy shenanigan, and any thoughts and theories of your own. I'd love to read them. And if you want to catch the live stream and you want to talk about it live, feel free to come on by. We'll be doing lots of content on this for the remake and stuff coming up in the future as well, especially with Crisis Core Reunion coming up. I'm very much looking forward to sharing my experience. Hope you have a good one. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you on the next one. Peace.